Alex was actually at the first blockchain conference that we did 3 years ago, and as I said this morning, he was one of the people that I sat kind of slightly open-mouthed as he explained what blockchain games could be about. Oh, a microphone, that'd be helpful. So he's very experienced, been around the blockchain space since before the blockchain space, game space was there, really. So we kind of thought it would be interesting, and we were chatting about what we were going to kind of a title for the talk, and I think partly as a joke, you came up with this: why did you spend a crazy amount of money on an NFT? But there is a reason for that. So can we have the slide up?
Hey.
There we go. So this is the reason. Get out of the way. This is the reason for the title. Or do you want to explain it, Alex? Or do you want to explain a bit who you are, and then?
Yeah. So I'm a traditional game developer by trade. I ran a studio in Sheffield for 20 years, and the most well-known game we made was an indie game called Euphoria, which was a big hit on the App Store. But that got me into blockchain and Bitcoin, and then NFTs, and this sort of whole crazy world. What this is about is a company called Blockade. They sold a load of things for a game called Neon District, and one of the things they wanted to sell was like the first boss in the game, and you'd be able to sort of see the boss and actually interact with it, regardless if you owned it, from one of their early prototypes, which they did release as well. So I had a really good think about whether to get involved with the boss, who's called BAUS. I think that's I don't know if it's a he or she or an it, I haven't decided yet, but it's got lots of tentacles, so. Anyway, it's a cyberpunk game, which you can probably tell. And it cost a lot of money. It was 141 ETH. I think it was $22,000, $24,000, something in that range. So it is absolutely insane to spend that money on a pre-sale item, which I'm not the biggest fan of, actually. But I did have a reason for it. I had multiple reasons for it. One, I've been in this space for a long time, and I'd actually stepped out of it for a little while whilst I was working for another company, looking at the same space, but I was very involved in other things. And so the first thing for me is actually owning an expensive NFT gets you quite a lot of publicity, and when you want to work in this space, that's quite a good thing. So it definitely got me recognized by some of the companies who hadn't known me, because they were new to the space in 2018 or 2017, at which point I'd gone a bit quieter. Second thing is, I had a game idea which could actually use boss characters, which is actually now being worked on by Blockade, which is really nice of them. And so I can make BAUS part of that. The third thing is, I think if this space is going to work, we're going to have, a friend of mine, Gabby Dixon, who some of you might know, I think we're going to have essentially celebrity NFTs. These are NFTs which are super rare. There will only be one of them. It could be the Formula 1 car, it could be a boss character like this, it could be a special Axie Infinity or a CryptoKitty. And I think it's on us as an industry to recognize that one of the powers of NFTs is that these items, or characters, because characters work best for this, can step outside of one game and into others in a way that is positive for everyone. And I wanted to be able to have a character that I could do that experiment with. I also own quite a big Axie, but this is the one I really want to play with, because it's a boss, and games tend to have bosses. It's something that we can all understand. So I plan to do the experiment a bit earlier than I have done, but I got waylaid by a back injury. But the idea is to take this character and actually try and work with some of the other people in the space to make this character interesting for their community and for their game, so that their community talk about it and are interested in it. I might see if I can rent it out. I might see if I can monetize it in certain ways in other game designs. But it's an expensive toy for me to play with, but because I work in this space, I can monetize it in ways that other people couldn't do it. So it's a big experiment, and I accept that.
A lot to unpick there. I mean, we haven't got enough time. We've already kind of done a pre-fireside chat last week, and that went on for quite a long time. So I'll try and kind of keep us on some sort of kind of a theme. So I think what's really interesting, and in fact, I kind of remember from 3 years ago when you were talking, or the first blockchain conference, you spoke a lot about interoperability. And interoperability is something that is mentioned, particularly with NFTs. And I guess we saw with CryptoKitties, that was kind of we had CryptoKitties, and then we had the Kittyverse, which was when people were basically building new experiences that people who had CryptoKitties could then go off and do. And there's a lot of kind of talk about that at the time, and then really for the last year, for me at least, it seems that kind of enthusiasm has drained away as people, one, just try to focus on their own games and projects, and two, the complexity of the technical aspect of interoperating NFTs and also the problems around kind of, even thematically, having NFTs from different games interrupting.
Interoperable.
So I mean, as someone who has kind of banged on about interoperability for quite a long time, I mean, do you think it's a harder problem, or is it just how the industry is kind of developed over the last year? I mean, do you think it's something that's going to come back? I mean, obviously that's something I guess you're trying to do.
I'm certain it will come in, but I don't think it's going to be in the shape that people talked about, because I think, I mean, in very early days, I was thinking about it in the same ways, and I realised quite quickly from speaking to other friends in the industry that I was just wrong. But I think it's taken a lot of other people some time to catch up with that. But that's purely because a lot of people making crypto games are not from the game industry. So you look at it as techies and as players, you haven't had the industry experience to kind of think things through. So there are technical issues. I'm going to put those aside because they are just a case of time. Okay. So yes, it's difficult at times. But more interesting is what we mean by interoperability. People tend to assume, to use the flaming sword example, people tend to assume a flaming sword in one game is a flaming sword in another game, or turns into a gun, say, in Reality Clash. And I'm not the biggest fan of that. I don't think it really makes sense to players or to developers, with the exception of if a game is heavily correlated with another game and the developers are friends and are looking to do cross-promotion of communities. Like, there will be some cases of that. But I think interoperability is more interesting when you look at it from a brand's point of view. I mean, actually, Animoca are doing a lot of work around brands. You can imagine them issuing some NFTs around their brands and then doing deals with different game developers to make use of that brand. And it could be paid one way or the other. But then it makes a whole lot more sense, because each individual game or mobile application, it doesn't just have to be a game, can look at what the player owns. You go, oh, you own this Marvel character or this or this Formula One car, and meanwhile there's been a deal that allows the person to make use of that in the game. The game might even be a Marvel game or something like that, or it could be a sports game, and you've got the Nike trainers, one of the early examples I used. So I think if you think of interoperability more from a brand's point of view, I think it's more interesting, and I think it also may get more interesting around some of the user-generated content we might see, where because artists become well-known in other games already, in Counter-Strike or whatever, it becomes easier for them and esports teams to create skins that could be used across multiple games, and their stuff to be recognised. So that, for me, is much more important about interoperability than one game using another game's assets. I think that's going to be a much more rare and very limited area.
And another thing that's kind of inherent in the title, which we've chosen for this, is a lot of the focus on NFTs is sometimes not overtly, but there is a strong kind of investment sort of dynamic going in there, and that's partly because of the people who are buying NFTs at the moment, potentially like you. But actually, what you're talking about with this interoperability is much more is kind of softer values, which is more about building community, and I think that's something in the blockchain game space we have kind of lost focus on. One, because it's so soft, it's kind of hard to do. It kind of almost happens inherently. So do you want to talk a little bit more about that kind of use of interoperability as kind of communities?
Yeah, I wish I could talk about more about the experiment that we're doing with Blockade, but we can't yet, because I'm very insistent that I can say a little bit, but I don't want to say too much, because I don't know if we're going to how long it will be continue for, because I'm insistent on, if a project's not working, then stop it. That's something I've learned from a couple of my own projects. But actually, what we're looking to do is connect communities up with the NFTs that they own. So if you own NFTs in Reality Clash, Neon District, Axie Infinity, whatever it happens to be, wouldn't it be nice if there was some way that you could use the whole bunch of those assets, including maybe some that are completely worthless because the game has died or they've been given away, and play another game with those. And so what we've come up with is an idea for how communities can actually work together and against each other. It's a competitive and cooperative game, and they battle using those NFTs. And we're just trying to create a world that allows that to happen. And really, it's an experiment to see if something that's built using blockchain assets can really make use of the fact there are communities who are really incentivized to use these blockchain assets, including their developers. Like, can we create to use the common term metaverse, can we create a sort of metaverse that isn't just we're going to make a role-playing game or we're going to make a shoot 'em up or anything like that? Can we create more of a metagame around this, which actually leverages what people are doing for their commercially, professionally, so high-quality content with real communities, even though they're quite small. Can we build a game that can actually connect all of those up, and benefit the developers and the artists, and yet the players can enjoy it. That's the experiment, and it's really as a proof of concept of what can you do.
And this is really, to me, this is kind of fascinating because this is kind of inherent with what blockchain is about, and I think, you know, maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong. Who knows how the year's going to pan out and which blockchain games will be successful. But within the blockchain game space, pretty much we've said the games we're making are the standard centralized games, and we're putting blockchain in them. Whereas we're not necessarily thinking, you know, a blockchain game could be a very different sort of thing because of this ownership, which is, I think, kind of where you're going towards with this kind of meta kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, actually, it's really useful to say how this came about. It was at GDC last year, and I asked someone, why are you making the game on the blockchain? And this is someone who I respect and I'm working with, and they gave a really crap answer, and I told them that, and I said, it's probably the answer I would give too, but really, we've got to do better. And so literally just sat there and said, right, this is what I want to do. I want to make a game which it could only happen because of a blockchain. Now, in this particular case, everyone has NFTs from different games, and even from ENS, or from known origin, or from where it happens to be. There's a lot of NFTs around for different things outside of games. So we know people have all these things. Now, in the real world, you have no way to find out what people own. Apple know, Steam know, within their particular ecosystems, but like as a developer, like we can't get that information. We have to request all sorts of logins and permissions, and it's impossible. And we could also never get permission from the developers to do certain things. It'd be too hard to I've spoken to Riot Games, but speak to them about NFTs, and whereas in the blockchain space, we have a small community of players, a small community of developers. We have an open inventory system on Ethereum. I know there are others, but we have to start somewhere. So if you want to try experiments based on ownership, like of new forms of game and new forms of narrative, it's the best place to be. But those experiments have to be capable of expanding into a wider ecosystem that's not blockchain. It might need permission from a Valve or an Apple, but we have to show that these games actually can attract players, and it's something unique that you could only start this in the blockchain space. And also, it's very important to note that it's for the developers of the products. It has to be done as a positive to them, not taking the players away, because that's scary. We have to show we can be a positive to them, add to their product.
Yeah. What was I going to say now? Does anyone want to join into the fight? Oh, have we got the mic? We have got another microphone, haven't we? Do you want to, yes, explain who you are, Patrick?
Hey guys, Patrick from DebRadar. Alex, quick question to you. Some people say that once you can collateralize NFTs, it's all going to explode. What's your take on that? Is under collateralization the solution?
No, but it is one of the interesting things. I think when people are involved in the blockchain space, there are a set of players who are, it's a very smaller number, probably double digits maybe, who have money, who experiment with lots of stuff, and then some of the other players who don't have much money are also starting to experiment with these things. And I think what it shows is that for an audience, they will start learning about finance through games, just as like a previous generation did with World of Warcraft. And from that point of view, I actually do think that games like Axie Infinity, who are really going down that rabbit hole, I think they are paving new ways, and I do think that if they can attract regular gamers, some of those gamers will then learn about finance in that arena. Yeah. I don't think it's the answer for NFTs, but I definitely think it's part of the benefit of blockchains is to explore that space. I think it doesn't solve other problems of blockchains, and you cannot make your game entirely about finance unless you're doing a finance game. So I think it's the whole decentralized finance area is really, really fascinating, and I'm really pleased to see a game exploring it. But I don't think it's going to be the thing that changes things.
That's a good question, because it reminded me when I went suddenly blank, what I'd been thinking about. But it was interesting, in Robbie's talk about staking your car. I mean, that's interesting from the DeFi kind of point of view. Me and Patrick talk a lot about kind of DeFi, and I'm really interested in DeFi. Actually, I've given talks about the possible combination of DeFi and gaming, and as like an onboarding kind of ramp thing. You could really see, we have seen with Axie that they've kind of built a kind of MakerDAO sort of staking system there.
I think you could do some really fascinating things, actually. There was a really good blog post, and I can't remember who made it, but the theme of the blog post is, if you can make my investments a game, then you've won. And when you look at what people are doing in decentralized finance on Ethereum, you can now invest in Tesla. I think it's Synthetics that are doing that. You can now loan money. You can borrow money if you have collateral, or even if you don't have collateral in some examples now. You can bank with one of various things and earn a small amount of interest, more than you'll get in a regular bank. And okay, this is only really available to crypto people, and there's going to be security issues. Like, it will go wrong at some point, but actually the ideas are really strong, because also you're not looking after the asset. It's still my money to take out, unlike in the bank. Now, that's really interesting if you're in some countries which don't have very good banking systems, and we always talk about crypto in those countries, and it's never quite worked yet. But if you're actually making a bit of money in the game, and you're only going to spend it in some other games, or you're just trading some NFTs, then where do you hold your money? In your wallet? Because the game itself could then say, well, if you bank with us, it's still your money, like, we cannot touch it, but you'll earn interest because we've negotiated a really good interest rate, or we can give you a really nice interface to die interest rates. So the first thing is I could bank with my game. The second thing is the game could give me advantages for banking with them, because they might also take a cut of the interest, or they might have an affiliate deal. So there is actually a different kind of almost monetization strategy that could happen there, by the game offering you the interface for some simple trades or investments or straightforward banking, in exchange for a few fees. And if the player is in the game anyway, imagine that kids are in Fortnite, imagine that's where their pocket money appears, because that's where they earn it. Then it can sort of stay within Fortnite, move to Facebook. That's the future that I think we're looking at with decentralized finance. It's a long way off, but I think we're seeing the very start of that.
It's not really in NFTs, I'll come to in a minute, but it is kind of interesting, because you can also think about staking in terms of community building. So your alliance is staking, and you're trying to attract people into your alliance. You're not a block producer, but you could kind of imagine the analogy in a game, and that being quite, because something I've always been very interested in is using blockchain for community building, and if you can obviously take blockchain kind of memes and use them in that way. And again, we've said it, Axie Infinity is very interesting. That they are a block producer on the Loom network. I mean, that if you're interested in probably, I think they're probably the most innovative kind of game at the moment in terms of what they're doing. Well worth checking out what Axie Infinity is doing and how they're kind of building a little kind of tech stack within what is a small game. Anyway, Vlad.
I have a question about your take on open game economies. Do you think they should be left alone, like as true open game economies, where the market decides all the prices or the corridors, the upper edge and the lower edge, or game developers should try to intervene in that and try to somehow direct it to restrict the players in the long run?
It depends what your game is. For the vast majority of cases, the game developer has to manage their economies, or the game's not going to work, because it might really annoy players. It might the economy might go completely out of control, as happens to Diablo 3 when they put real money stuff in it. So I think for the most part, developers need to have control, but that doesn't mean control 100% of your economy. You can have some really high, some luxury type stuff, which can be very, very open. You can have some free stuff, which is then up to the players to add value to it by through gameplay or anything like that, or through esports. But I think generally you need to be in control of your economy. That doesn't mean it's going to be true in all cases. It might be that for a particular game type, it might monetize very much based on trading and not sales. It could be very much things are given away, but they've heavily monetized trading in some way or some other aspects, in which case they can leave it to be a more open economy. But generally speaking, I do believe that a developer's got to be managing their economy very, very carefully, or it will spin out of control.
Good. Oh, yes. Just tell us who you are, Andy.
Yeah, my name's Andy Gray from BlockRocket. We build a digital art marketplace called Non-Origin, so nothing to do with gaming, so I'll ask a question. Earlier, I think in the presentations we've seen so far, there's like a similar theme, everyone explaining how NFTs are interoperable and traceable. And Alex has gone on to talk about how he's got aspirations for games that NFTs exist in across. But what I've found from speaking to people, I wonder if a lot of that rhetoric's used to sell the pre-game items. Do you think there is actually a real appetite for people to want to break out of the universes they've created? Because obviously there's traditional advantages for keeping the NFTs within. I sometimes doubt whether people actually want to leave those ecosystems. Do you think it will happen, or do you think it's just a good story?
Again, that's why I said that I think if you're talking about that interoperable aspect, for the most part, I see it more from brands and perhaps UGC and esports type stuff rather than from the developer, because it doesn't necessarily make sense. As a player, it depends again how I've obtained the NFT and what it's doing for me. So it's going to be quite case specific. But in the example that we're experimenting with, we're designing a game that you can literally play it once a week by pressing a button, and then that's it. So we're not trying to get you deeply involved in something, but trying to actually have a wider narrative you can also play a role in, which is very, very different from more trying to attract me to another game and make me play the game every day. And I think players may or may not be up for that deeper level of involvement. But that said, like, there are some games where there are some overlaps potentially, and I think in those cases it might work. But I think in the general case, no. I don't think it's something that is interesting enough to players or easy for them to understand. It's going to be more like the big luxury stuff, the branded items, the Nike stuff. I still love the idea of Nike trainers that I've purchased, and then it changes my FIFA game and my NBA game, because it will happen. Like, it makes absolute sense. It's a marketing play.
Good. I think we'll leave our little fireside chat there.